Bam! Hello, world history people! Let's learn all about the Middle Ages today, also called the Dark Ages or the Medieval Period. This is sort of the sad, depressing time in European history because before this period, Rome and Greece and Alexander the Great were these fantastic civilizations doing a bunch of great, awesome stuff. But then for 1,000 years, Europeans got dumber. They didn't know how to build these fancy buildings anymore, and they just kind of reverted to a lower level of civilized society. But then in some ways they improved. So it's a mixed bag. But for the most part, not a great thing that happened. And it showed you that in 1,000 years, things could get worse rather than get better. So let's go ahead and click on through this. Here we go. Clickety click. So yeah, that's the Colosseum of ancient Rome. It was still there during the medieval period. All these peasants would walk by and be like, wow, how'd they build that thing? We have no idea. And yeah, these aqueducts that the old Romans built, what was their purpose? They weren't using them anymore. Okay, so this is kind of the whole point of the medieval period. For 1,000 years, Europe was rebuilding from all the devastating events that surrounded the fall of the Roman Empire. It was sort of like you hit the reset button on European history. Let me give you this example. These were buildings built in ancient Rome, and these were buildings built 1,000 years later near Rome. So all this architectural knowledge lost. All the knowledge how to build these fancy aqueducts and colosseums and amphitheaters lost. And it's all because of these Huns that invaded Rome and sacked it and killed all the smart people. So it didn't work out. Okay, the people are walking around like, wow, look at all this old stuff. Where did it come from? And man, that's a cool theater. I wonder when it was used. And what's the purpose of these aqueducts for? And now Europeans are just dumb people. Yep, and the past, the future. Yeah. Okay, so during this 1,000-year period, the Latin language was only spoken by church officials. Because back in the day, Latin was spoken by all people in the country of Rome. But what happened was people started to get fractured and distant from each other. And then all these barbarian people moved in, and the barbarian people had their own languages. So Latin and these barbarian languages started mixing together, and it created all the different languages we know in Europe to this day. So that's why French and Spanish and Portuguese and Italian are all different. It was because during this period, different barbarian groups kind of altered the languages, and they didn't really talk to each other, didn't really communicate that much anymore. So, boom, there you go. All right, here's kind of the language cores of Europe. And yeah, here's more stuff about how languages split apart in Europe. Okay, now because of all the uncertainty of this time, because that there's all these Huns riding around on horses, and then the Visigoths come by and the Vandals come by, people said we need defense. So they built castles all over Europe, these fortresses where the common people could come into, hide, and wait out while bad people came into their lands and tried to attack them and steal their stuff. And these castles did create kind of a new social system called feudalism. And I'll deep dive into feudalism on the next slide. But yeah, the whole reason why there's castles all around Europe is because Europe was so unsafe. People needed those walls to feel more secure. So, yep, the High Middle Ages and then castles. And I was surprised how many castles there were in Europe when I toured Europe back in, 2009? There was so many castles. Yeah, castle pictures. Hey, yeah, so many castles. Look at that castle. So great. It's built on an island, super defensible. And here's a castle with a moat and all kinds of other stuff. Yeah, here's another with a moat. And then, yep, the defenders. It was always so hard to attack a castle. They have to build these siege towers, use catapults. You'd always lose a whole bunch of dudes. So many times when bad people would come nearby or come into your country during medieval times, people would hide in the castle and the bad guys would just leave. Okay, it was pretty rare that castles would get assaulted. All right, so now let's deep dive into feudalism. So feudalism is this new societal structure really based on this whole system of a castle. And the whole idea is that one person owns that castle and everybody else kind of reports to them. And there was very little mobility in this societal system, okay? If you were a king or a lord, you had a castle, maybe had several castles, and you ruled large sections of land, you ruled a kingdom. Below the king or the lord were the nobles. Maybe if you're a noble, you have kind of a smaller castle somewhere in the kingdom, but you're rich, you're wealthy, you're hanging out with the king all the time, you're the upper class. Below the nobles were the knights, and knights reported to these upper classes. They were the soldiers, the enforcers, the police officers. But then below knights, and this is probably 95% of the people of Europe, they were peasants or serfs. Super duper poor people who were effectively slaves to their lands. Serfs were not allowed to leave the area nearby the castle they served. You did not have freedom of movement. You couldn't speak out against your lord. You couldn't change your religion. All those things would result in you being killed. But then this is where feudalism gets interesting. So you'd think that the kings and the lords are at the top of this social pyramid, but that's not true. All classes in feudalism had to obey the clergy. Clergy is the fancy word for the Roman Catholic Church, and especially the Pope. The Pope is the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. Yeah, because during this period, the only version of Christianity is the Roman Catholic Church, and so that's not going to get disputed yet. But yeah, I'll tell you, it was not great. It was not great to live in feudalism. Because if the Pope had a problem with a king, all the Pope had to do was say like, hey, peasants, your king's a bad guy, kill him. And then the peasants would probably kill him, because the Pope is truly even above the king. All right, yeah, here's just a little hierarchy of what I just explained. But yeah, the serfs, they're way at the bottom, functionally slaves. It sucks. Okay, so then there's some other culture of medieval times that I think is rather interesting. So the knights, the warrior class, they followed an honor code called chivalry. And this code glorified combat, it glorified honor and not backing down and not surrendering, and it also glorified romantic love. Oh, and it did give this sense of order in this crazy, crazy time. Knights also competed in this violent sport called jousting. One time I played jousting with pool noodles and bicycles. It worked out very badly. It was not good. I don't recommend it. But jousting was a way to just show how brave you were. And, I mean, there's definitely a lot of code to chivalry. And a question I always like to propose to my students, is chivalry dead? And usually all the female students in the class say it is. And they say that there's no chivalrous men anymore, that they don't get any of this kind of respect. But anyway, that's what chivalry's all about. So let's check it out. All right, here's a knight doing his thing. And then, oh, look at that, getting some romantic love from a princess, and then jousting it up, and that guy got jousted in the face. Ouch. Okay, so peasants and serfs, they were all based around what are called manors. And yes, there were manors generally close to castles. Usually they were kind of like mini castles, and these manors were fortified areas where the serfs could run away into. But yeah, and I mentioned this before, they could not leave their land without their lord's permission. You were functionally a slave. It sucked. You gotta do whatever the Lord says, and if you disobey the Pope or you disobey your Lord, you're accused of being a witch and you're burned alive. So, not fun. And you just work all the dang time. Oh, and here's the crazy thing too. The reason why I especially equate these people to being slaves is it wouldn't be uncommon for a king or a lord or a noble to sell their land. And whenever they sold their manor, sold their land, the new person who bought the land also owned the serfs. And every once in a while the king could be like, hey, I need to raise an army. Well, the nobles could go around the manor and just start pulling young men out of their houses and saying, okay, you work on my land, you live on my land, now you're a knight. Go fight. And they would have no choice in the matter, so it's pretty crazy stuff. All right, here they are just working away and living the manor life. Manor life, what up? Okay, so, and now let's talk about how the Pope is really the person on top here. If a lord or a king ever disagreed with the clergy, especially disagreeing with the Pope, they could get excommunicated. That means disconnected from Christianity. It's sort of like the Pope makes this public declaration that the king of France or Germany or wherever is a servant of the devil, and the good Christian people of the world need to kill that person to rise in society or get better ranks. And the people did it. Okay, like this was really common, where the Pope would be like, "Hey king, I need you to go on crusade," and the king wouldn't go on crusade, and then the Pope's like, "Boom, excommunicated, bye-bye," and the people would kill him. The church also was really, really corrupt during this period. The Catholic Church is two thumbs down during the Middle Ages, because the Catholic Church would just promote people who gave the most money to the church. People bought their way into becoming the Pope. It really didn't focus on the ideas or the beliefs that are deep down Christianity. It was just a couple guys who really wanted to make more money and live a super duper fancy life. I'm going to use the phrase the church quite a bit, but by the church, I'm meaning the Roman Catholic Church, headquartered in Rome. All right. So yeah, it's all about money. You're excommunicated, bye-bye, and get that money for the church. Yes, and then here's just another thing that beyond frustrates me. When people ask, why is it that technology and societal progress fell so much during this 1,000-year period? Well, it was because the Roman Catholic Church tried to basically mind control everybody. The church was the supreme academic entity. If you wanted to go to school, you read the Bible. If you wanted to go to college, they trained you how to become a priest. Okay? There was no hospitals, no science. All art had to be art about the church in some way. It was a very kind of repressive mind control sort of state. And also, the church began requiring a tithe from everyone in Europe. And that means 10% of all the food you grow or the money you make or whatever you do, 10% of your contribution economically must be given to the church in donations. And the reason why I have donations in parentheses there is they weren't honestly donations. If you only gave 8% of your money to the church people would find you, call you a witch, kill you, and take all of your money. So yeah, it was a really bad organization back in the day. The Catholic Church is cool now. High five to Catholics now. But in the past, not so much. All right. So, yep, there's, they are talking about Jesus. Yeah, honor the Lord with your giving. Remember this, who sows sparingly reaps sparingly. Whoever sows generously will reap generously. So this is the one passage in the Bible that's cited all the time as being the reason why you should give your money to the church. Money is evil, give it to us. There you go. And so, yeah, the church got huge amounts of money during this period. And they built a lot of really impressive structures. They built the largest church in the world. I've been there. It's super cool. It's called St. Peter's Basilica. It's in the Vatican City in Rome. It basically is the Vatican City. And it's the supreme center of Christianity. It was finished about 500 years ago. And even today's standards, it's one of the most impressive buildings I've ever been in my life. And it's been around for 500 years. So, holy cow, amazing. Yeah, there's so many awesome statues, so many great pictures everywhere. It's top tier. It's the biggest religious structure on planet Earth. So, good job, Christianity. You took all the money from those people during the medieval ages, and you made this incredible building as a result. So here's St. Peter's Basilica. This is what it looks like on the inside. This is where the Pope sits to give sermons. It's a whole bunch of gold behind him and angels. And then, boom, St. Peter's Basilica. And, oh, look who's this significantly thinner, how old was I, 20 years old guy. So there I am hanging out in Rome. Okay, now all of Europe was disunified in these small countries or city-states. And many times, cities and small regions of Europe switch loyalty back and forth. Like there's this place called Alsace-Lorraine, which has switched from being like French to German like 100 or more times. It's insane. But yeah, there was all this, like, the borders were not consistent. Okay, like that's really what I wanted to say. That it was really hard for even the common people to sort of know what country they were in, what side they were on, because the borders fluctuated immensely. Only France and England were, quote, countries during this time period. Some other European countries that you probably think should be around. Well, Spain only became a country in 1490, Germany in 1880, and Italy in 1885. It's so crazy to me that the United States is 100 years older than Germany or Italy. And that's largely because Germany and Italy were these thousands of kingdoms. Like, see, this is a medieval map of Germany. It's like, I can't even count how many countries that is. It's ridiculous. So, and here's the medieval map of Italy. Well, I don't know, what is this, like 12 countries? So yeah, they only finally got together in the 1880s. Okay, and the Holy Roman Empire, it was kind of a country. I mean, it was sort of this like loose alliance of a lot of little countries, but the Holy Roman Empire's borders changed all the time. And the weird thing about the Holy Roman Empire is it wasn't holy, because it always had a lot of problems with the Pope. It wasn't Roman, because they never owned the city of Rome. Was it an empire? Well, okay, I guess it was an empire. But it's weird how they named it that when it's really kind of like Germany. And the HRE had constant problems with the church. I know of like 3 Holy Roman emperors who get excommunicated by the church. The people rise up against that Holy Roman emperor. They fight him, they kill him, and then everything goes into chaos all over again. So that's just pretty constant stuff right there. And then yeah, here's the Pope and the bishops and cardinals given the crown to the Holy Roman Emperor. All right, and then here's another pretty big important deal: the 100 Years' War between Britain and France. This was a pretty big part of the Middle Ages, or the later Middle Ages, and this was when Britain invaded France and tried to take them over. And Britain probably did about half the job, and the tide of war finally changed for the French when in 1425 this 16-year-old girl has a revelation from God, and God speaks to her and says, you need to lead the French army, you need to kick out the English. And that's what she did. She won a series of victories by inspiring all these French troops. But what happened, I think, at the city of Orleans, she was captured, put into a British jail. She was accused of being a witch, and she was burned alive. Ouch. But interesting historical fact: the French army only shows success when it's led by a 5-foot-tall Italian guy or a 16-year-old girl. That's so sad but true. Sorry, France. Not a lot of wins in your history book. Okay, so this is what the map looked like back during the 100 Years' War. Britain's just moving on in, and there's Joan of Arc talking to angels, leading the men into battle. She gets put in prison and then burned alive. That really sucks. Okay, here's another important historical event. In 1066, William the Conqueror wins the Battle of Hastings. And this is the last time that Britain is sort of like taken over by anyone else. After this point, William becomes the new King of England. And I don't know if his family's still in charge, but nobody else after him ever takes over England again. Like, they're almost 1,000 years without ever being invaded successfully. And it's really because England's this island, really hard to attack an island unless you got a bunch of ships, and England has traditionally always had a whole bunch of ships, so you can't get at England really easily. England will now become the most aggressive country in world history, and still to this day, in modern day, there's only 22 countries in the world that Britain has not invaded, but there are 0 countries in the world that have invaded Britain. I think that's so interesting. So, yep, and that's the great thing about England. It's an island. It's really hard to get at them. And yeah, look at how fractured Germany is. Oh my gosh, it's just a million little countries. And yeah, all the countries in pink are countries that have been invaded by England. And England invaded us a bunch of times. In 1812, they burned the White House down. So basically, if your country has a coastline, England's getting on you. All right, and now this is just my favorite part. Vikings, a huge part of the Dark Ages, were these people in Northern Europe in modern day Norway, Sweden, Iceland, Finland. They're collectively known as the Vikings or the Norsemen, and these guys were another big reason you wanted to build castles. Because if you saw some Vikings sailing up the river, hide in the castle, hide for weeks or days or however long it has to be. They were crazy people. They love violence. They love stealing stuff. They would capture people, make them slaves. They would keep you up at night because they were super duper scary. Nowhere safe. They would hit everywhere. This map shows you all the Viking attacks that happened in Europe during the first parts of the Middle Ages. So nowhere safe. Hide your kids, hide your wife. Okay. And then here's more of these Viking adventures. They're just going all around the rivers of Europe. See, they even went all the way to Canada back in 1000. They set up a little outpost in Canada, but then it was like, it's too cold, let's go home. So that's sort of what they did. And here they are stacking heads, chopping up some priests, and doing bad things to ladyfolk. Okay, so the Norse people, they had these Norse gods, and it was almost the same kind of religion that ancient Greece was. They had each god sort of interpreted as each element, or each god kind of had their own thing. For example, Loki was the trickster god, Thor is the god of lightning, Odin is the god of wisdom. And it was sort of just like ancient Greece. There's this god soap opera where the gods would be fighting each other. Sometimes the gods would kill each other, and because there's these so many gods it's tough to know to unite the people around all these many gods when these gods supposedly hate each other. That could go into the various Viking clans in the real world. Eventually, Christianity made its way up into the Norsemen lands, and Norsemen more and more started to vibe with Christianity, and the Norse gods would be functionally done by the year 1100. So, boom. But yeah, there's Thor leading the Viking ships, cracking the hammer, and then boom, fighting serpents. Norse gods, super cool. And then this is something I really love to mention. Viking women. A lot of cultures in the past really did not give women credit or any kind of positions of authority, but that was absolutely not the case with the Vikings. Viking women were totally equal to men in just about every way. They could hold leadership positions, they could participate in battle, they could do all this violent stuff the men do. And I remember this really freaked out Europeans. When they saw women fighting them, they're like, this isn't appropriate. Women need to be at home and take care of the babies. But yeah, so women powerful, women can do it too. Murder, all that stuff. So boom, Viking women on the march, leading the charge, kicking butt. Interesting fact, the days of the week are based on Norse gods. Tuesday is Tyr's Day. Wednesday is Woden Day. Thursday is Thor's Day. We should bring that back. And Friday is Frigg Day. Vikings also really enjoyed calling themselves these obscenely violent names, like Eric Bloodaxe, Thorfinn Skull Splitter. Like these are the names they put on their own tombstones. So they're just these hardcore dudes and ladies. Okay, and now let's talk about some stuff that happened at the very end of the Middle Ages. So at the very end of the Middle Ages, there was the invention of the heavy plow that made farming a lot more easily because there was a lot of really difficult soil that farmers always struggled to grow stuff on. And also, people became organized in what were called guilds. It's when a bunch of craftsmen worked together to, hey, you're a blacksmith in this town, I'm a blacksmith in this town, let's teach each other and learn stuff. So guilds was kind of this way for people to improve their skills outside of the church authority, because schools only taught you stuff about Jesus, and now guilds you could actually learn a trade. So that's pretty cool. People became better and more efficient. Here's those new plows. Here's people hanging out in these marketplaces and then working on a blacksmith guild. Some other inventions in the later Middle Ages would be the crossbow, early cannons, and the arquebus gun. And all these inventions were more or less imported from China, but they finally made their way to Europe. Interesting fact. Pope Innocent III tried to ban crossbows. He said that they were so deadly and so violent they should never be used. But people kept using them. Sorry, Pope. And arquebuses, yeah, they're early guns, but they were really unreliable and really inaccurate. And if my choice was between a crossbow and an arquebus, I'd choose the crossbow any day of the week. So, but it is sort of step one into becoming closer and closer to modern weapons. And that's it for me. All right, peace out, everybody.